Hi, my friends. Welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, your host, and also an indie author. I'm thrilled you're joining me today for another fun interview with a passionate author. We're going to kick off this show with an exciting reading, so let's get started.
Hi, I am RK Phillips. I am a new author. I put out my first book on March 14th of this year, so 2020. My first book is called The Complications of Pie. It is an interesting book. I'm going to read a little bit from a chapter. Let me give you a little bit leadway so you know where I am. This is a female book. So my main character, her name is Peyton, and she is actually going on the first date with other character, which is Nicola. So she is about to get out of her car and go into this little coffee shop in this scene. Okay, here we go. I hope you enjoy. Straightening her shoulders, she walked as tall as she could through the front door and looked around. The butterflies in her stomach picked up flapping around as if someone walked straight through a swarm of them, sending them scattering. There Nicholas sat in the back corner, writing in what looked like a notebook. She looked as beautiful as the last two times Peyton had seen her. Long legs were crossed and bare to gaze upon. She was wearing a khaki-colored shorts and a blue tank top. Her hair was all pulled up in a clip and hit just below her shoulders. It reminded her of one of those fancy coffee drinks people took pleasure in. It was like caramel with bits of dark chocolate streaked through it. As Peyton approached, Nicola must have sensed her because her head came up slowly, and as two pairs of eyes met one another, the smile that shone almost melted Peyton to the spot. Peyton stumbled from it and knocked the nearby chair, causing herself to trip a little. When she had righted both herself and the chair, her red cheeks flamed up in even more embarrassment when she saw the merriment and laughter dancing in Nicola's eyes and heard the giggle that she had let out. Peyton wanted to die from humiliation and muttered to herself, "Graceful?" The next word she heard had her relaxing a bit. "Never had anyone fall for me quite that fast before. I'm just glad I didn't stumble to the floor." Peyton paused a moment and then continued over to the table and with caution pulled out the chair across from Nicola and eased down. "Hey!" Despite the unusual icebreaker, shyness still washed over her. "Hey, Peyton. Glad you agreed to meet me. I wasn't sure if you would show up." "Yeah, honestly, I didn't know if I would show up either." "Why?" "Not sure exactly. I'm not like my brother. He makes waves everywhere he goes and dives headfirst into things. I am the one who hides in the background, stays home to read or whatever, like my usual things, and randomly takes chances on things." "Well, I'm happy you took a chance tonight. What made you choose to finally call and then message me?" Peyton looked down at the table before replying. "My brother and my best friend kept pushing me to do it." "Had to be guilted into it, huh?" She smiled when she said it, but Peyton felt as if she might have also been a little hurt. "No, just that I had made such a huge ass out of myself and because of the misunderstanding. I didn't think you'd want to see me." "What misunderstanding?" "Flapjacks. I had to bring that up, didn't I?" Peyton could feel the heat begin its return to her cheeks. It must have only been gone for a commercial break. "Oh, that good, huh? Spill it. You tell me and I will go get us something to drink." Sucking in a deep breath, Peyton got it all out in one long exhale. Might as well rip off the Band-Aid fast. I thought you and my brother were interested in each other." Blinking eyes stared at her from across the table while the words must have been processing, and then Nicholas smiled and let out a little chuckle. "I figured that out the night we were at your parents' house for dinner." "Yeah, well." Peyton's mind recalled that night and the reaction she had to her, and her whole body was heating up. "You're very cute when you blush." Peyton let a little groan escape before she could stop herself. The infamous C word. "Don't like the word cute, huh?" "It makes me think of puppy dogs and babies." Nicola leaned across the table and lowered her voice. "I was going to say that your pink tinged cheeks makes you sexy, and I'm imagining all sorts of wicked things over here, and how I might be able to turn your whole body that color, but I thought you might rather not hear that. Thus the cute comment, but alas, I will refrain from that word. The words wrapped around Peyton, and she would swear she now matched the color of her dress. This woman was intense. Peyton just stared speechless at the other woman. I see that really got to you. You, dear, are going to be fun to tease. She licked her bottom lip and after a pause finished, in more ways than one. Returning to her original position, Nicola grinned. How do you feel about the word adorable? Depends. How about I go buy something to drink? I'll go. Don't want you to have another chance encounter with a chair and spill a hot liquid on yourself. I might be forced to administer first aid. And those words evoked just the reaction Nicola had aimed for. What would you like to drink, and would you enjoy one of the tasty treats? I know firsthand that all of their pastries are delicious. You're very kind. How about a couple of cookies and a glass of milk? I'm not really a coffee drinker, and it's too hot for cocoa. Milk and cookies for the beautiful lady it is. I shall return very shortly. Nicholas stood up, and when she got next to Peyton, leaned down and whispered, Don't leave. I won't. Good. With that, she disappeared, giving Peyton time to regain some control and to quit acting like she was a naive virgin who didn't know the first thing about flirting and sexual innuendos. There was just something about Nicola that caused all brain function to flitter out of one's mind and land somewhere on the floor by one's feet. Nicola returned carrying 2 glasses of milk and a plate of cookies. Peyton looked up at her, communicating wordlessly. What can I say? After you mentioned it, it sounded like the perfect treat. Been a while since I had milk and cookies, and I don't think my body is going to go into shock without a caffeinated drink. Are you sure? My friend Simone goes into a crazy rage moan if her body isn't served caffeine on a regulated schedule. I swear she probably has alarms set for it. I might not drink them, but I can make them. I learned quickly in college that if she had a late night and an early class, it was better for my health if I woke up earlier than she did and had a cup of coffee ready to go before poking her with a stick and bolting from the room. A bear, is she? Peyton's eyes were transfixed as Nicola raised the milk to her lips and took a drink. The glass fogged up momentarily from the warmth of the breath escaping Nicola's lips before clearing once more. As the drink was lowered, Peyton watched the other woman's tongue swipe over her lips to remove any leftover milk particles. Then that same mouth broke into a smile and a chuckle came out. Peyton shook her head to clear the fog and realized she had been caught staring. What? Oh, bear, right. She was very much so. Here, try this. Nicola broke off a piece of her cookie and held it out to Peyton. She took it and popped it into her mouth and moaned at the taste of the sugar, butter, and chocolate melting over her tongue, and the taste of vanilla bursting like drops of water. Good, isn't it? Oh, my stars, it is! It's one of my favorite that they do. They only had one of them left. I wanted to make sure you had a piece, but I am selfish enough not to give you all of it. Peyton tried her hardest not to think about the fact that what also added to the intoxicating taste was the fact that it was from the woman herself. So you and Simone have been friends since college? Yes, we have. Cy and I had a couple of classes together. Then when an opportunity came up, we ended up being roommates in dorm. Cy? Yeah, when she found out that my family calls me Pie, she said she should be Cy. Then together we were Pie Cy or Cy Pie, and the nickname stuck. I noticed that night at your dinner, your family would call you that. How did you end up with that nickname? It doesn't seem like an obvious choice from Peyton. Peyton raised her hands to her face to hide and finished chewing the bite of chocolate chip cookie she had just bitten off. Nicola reached across the table and removed one of her hands. No way. You can't get out of telling me the story. Why is it that I'm revealing everything about me and you haven't said anything about yourself? Because you're a very interesting puzzle and I want to solve it. Trust me, I'm not that interesting. I'm really very basic. I highly doubt that. It's true. I work a lot, visit with my family when I can, hang out at home or Cy's house, and go out when Damien drags me to one of his functions he needs a date for. What about yourself? I do a bit of work and spend time volunteering at several organizations around town. I like to stay busy. One corner of Nicola's mouth lifted up and she demanded, "Now, tell me about pie." "What kind of work do you do?" "Nope. I'll tell you later. Answer me." With a huge sigh, Peyton gave in. "Fine, you win. Pie is a dessert that most people enjoy after dinner. It comes in a variety of flavors and textures. There are fruit pies that are cooked down fruit with sugar and have a crust on the bottom and top usually. Some people get decorative with the top crust, making beautiful designs out of it. It can also be made into a cobbler, which in my opinion is just a big rectangular pie." She stopped when Nicola went from biting her lips to just chortling and holding her hands to her stomach. "Stop with the definition. I can't take it." In response, Peyton stuck her tongue out at her. That, of course, made things worse, and Nicola just roared harder. They were drawing the notice of people around them, which Peyton didn't like but just ignored. She picked up a cookie and ate it while smiling. She was glad that Nicola didn't seem to be upset at her avoidance tactics. After a few moments, the woman recovered and wiped her hands with a napkin. The smile was still in place. "You are a nut, Miss Peyton. I would ask if anyone has ever told you so, but knowing your brother, I have my answer." "This is very true. Damien takes pleasure in reminding me about my oddities. He loves you very much, you know. He talks about you, and when he does, you can see the love and pride he holds for you in his eyes." In response, Peyton looked down at the table and mumbled, "I know." Then she cleared her voice and noticed they had finished their treat. "I should go throw this away and return the dishes. I'll be back." She gathered up the plate, cups, and trash and managed thankfully to walk to the trash can and toss everything but the plate away without falling or causing an incident. The dish she placed in the bin for the dirty ones. She returned and found the other woman just silently watching her with a grin on her face. She sat and didn't know what to do now that they had finished. "I guess we should be going." "I suppose so. I have honestly really enjoyed talking with you tonight. I haven't laughed that hard in a long time." Peyton stood and grabbed her purse. "Stick around and you'll be entertained. People are always laughing at me for one reason or another." They walked towards the exit next to each other. "I intend to stick around." They had arrived at Peyton's car and paused. Okay, well, I guess I'll call you." Nicola raised her hand and cut Peyton's cheek. "How about I call you, since I have a feeling if I wait for you, it might be a while." Peyton just shrugged and nodded in one awkward gesture while Nicola continued to hold her cheek. She could feel sweat crawling all over her skin and a mixture of fear and arousal. Before she realized it, her hand had risen and covered Nicola's on her cheek. Was the girl going to kiss her? Did she want her to? If she was honest with herself, she really did want the kiss. Nicola leaned in and whispered, "Good night, adorable pie. I still want the story and will not be detoured." Then she kissed her on the corner of the mouth, slipped her hand away from Peyton's, and walked towards her own car. A full 2 minutes, 120 seconds passed before Peyton lowered one hand and lifted up to the spot where lips met flesh. She was in so much trouble if that one chaste meeting about made her whimper in need and collapse in desire. All the way home, Peyton relived the night, and both groans and laughter serenaded the darkness. She enjoyed hanging out with the beautiful woman. She just wished she didn't always make an ass out of herself. There wasn't much she could do about that part. She and inanimate objects had a tenuous relationship at best. When she went to sleep that night, though, it wasn't the trips, bumps, and bruises she had on her mind. No, it was the smell of rain and the hint of a taste of sweetness.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. And we have the fabulous R.K. Phillips with us today. Madam, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that reading. How do you feel?
I feel like I need a drink after reading all that. That was quite long.
It was awesome. I'm so excited. So you're a new author, recently published.
Yes.
How does that? Tell me about it. How is that journey now that you have published your first book?
Well, it is very exciting. It has been received a little better than I was expecting because I didn't have high expectations when I started writing. I was so glad to get this first one done, and now I just have to prove to myself I can do it again.
Okay, so tell us about this book.
The whole way the Complications of Pie came about is because I started having friends of mine write and do self-publishing books and stuff. And I kept yelling at them that they needed to have like this nerdy math girl in their books, and no one ever would put a nerdy math girl in their book. So I love numbers, and I'm a math weirdo and love math. I have since I was a child. That's why, I want those kind of characters in my books. I had been toying with the idea of writing a novel myself, and it was like on my bucket list. A few other things like led up to it. But finally I was like, well, if no one else is going to put this kind of character in a book, I'm going to do it myself. And so thus Peyton was born. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to have her do, but she is a math professor. She's a very simple, like introverted kind of person as well. I try to make her to where she's like lovable. I do tell people, don't worry, there's not like any kind of like hardcore, math in it or anything like that. There's a couple like little math tricks in there, but they're geared towards ones like she's volunteering at like an elementary school or something. So they're on kind of like that level.
I love the fact that your disclaimer is about math. Not about the intensity of the book, not about the heat level. You're like, let me explain. You're going to be okay. The math is not that bad. I was expecting like, there's nothing graphic, there's no nudity. You threw me for a loop. I was like, the math. I didn't see that.
Well, here's the thing. I guess my disclaimers are different. I got to thinking the other day. I was like, no, I keep saying and I harp on and I play off the whole PI, and even the PIE, because Peyton's full name is Peyton Ireland Edison. So her initials is PIE. So you have that, and then her birthday is on March 14th, which is Pi Day. She became a math professor. So I really play that up in a lot of things I do. And I purposely, once I couldn't meet like my one deadline I was wanting to for release, I held on to it for a few months later just so I could release the book on Pi Day. So, I mean, I really just went all out. So since I so emphasize like all the math things, I don't want people to worry like, oh my goodness, she's a math professor at this college. This is going to get like, bleh, and it doesn't. Because I know most people don't care about that and they don't like math. So I try to warn them so it'll be nice and enjoyable for them to read.
I love that disclaimer.
And the second disclaimer, so everyone in my job, like I have a day job. I'm an oil and gas accountant during the day. A lot of my coworkers on my team know I write. So when I finished it, a lot of them were like, ooh, we want to read it. And I was like, I don't know. You could buy the book to support me. I'm not saying don't buy my book. I just don't know if you want to read it. Because while I was writing it, I ended up choosing to do like a female book is not as popular as a lot of other things. And I understand that, and I just didn't care. I wanted to still do that because that's what my character, that's what Peyton wanted. And so I decided to do that. So I tried to tell them, hey, this is, this kind of book. Then I go, but this book doesn't have any sex in it. It has a lot of making out, petting, everything that leads up to it. And there's some action, like other kind of action, not that kind of action in the book.
So tell us, are we looking at a series or is this a standalone?
Okay, this particular book is just a standalone. If I have people that read it and go, you know what, I really love her brother, maybe I'll write his story, because the way I write him, like Peyton and Damien, her brother, have a really close like relationship. And the way I write him and hint at things could easily like lead into his book. But other than that, it's not going to be a series. I may use it as part of like a bunch of like random standalone books that'll have like this theme to them that I may eventually like, okay, here's like all of my like volunteering books or something like that. But they'll be all in different worlds and, but pretty much it's a standalone.
Who's your target audience for this?
My target audience is pretty well any adult that wants to take a chance on reading something that is maybe outside of what they currently read. So I want people to pick it up knowing that it's two females, to give that like subgenre a chance. I want people to go, math, but still pick it up and see math people are sexy too. And it's very like just down home. It's just like a nice contemporary romance. And it's a lot about, Peyton's journey from where she is at the beginning of the book to the end of the book. All about her like emotional journey as well.
Does it have a happy ending? Because romance lately end up with no happy endings, and you're going, ooh.
Okay.
Without
No,
spoiling
I know.
Without spoiling
It doesn't have like one of those, let's say, fairy tale and they rode off into the sunset happy endings, but it has like one of those happy for now endings. Like, they're going to be fine.
I can deal with that.
I try not to reveal a lot about the backstory of it because it's kind of personal. Some of this came about for other things, but when I was writing towards the end, there are certain things that happen like later on in the book. Once you read it, you'll know. You'll be like, oh, yeah, that's why. I got towards the end and I was like, I told my friend, I'm like, dude, I don't know if I can give Peyton a happy ever after or a happy ending. And my friend was like, why not? And I'm like, maybe I should just something bad and whatever. She's like, and then I'm like, but I know if I do that, I can't call it romance. It's fiction. And I hate books like that you read and they're supposed to be romance and they even say they are. And then at the end, it's not that. I get mad. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that to people. And I'm glad it worked out really well. I love the way it ended. I just love the whole thing, actually. Both of those characters, they're like my favorites right now.
That is a beautiful thing.
She goes through a lot, though. I will say that.
It is still very cozy. It's a cozy romance. Anybody can pick it up without having to know a lot about it, which is kind of fun. And it's all about that person's development, whatever you like, whatever your preference is. Still
and a lot of I try to put a lot of humor. Okay, so I put a lot of my humor in it, but sometimes my humor is not what everybody else's humor is. She's obviously, by the scene I read, she's kind of a little bit of a clumsy person. And you see that like all the way through the book. So some of those instances are kind of funny, and then some of them are not quite so funny. It's all about like them or her and her best friend. So you see like her very small world really like in depth.
I like how she describes her life. It's like, my life is kind of boring, And you're going, it sounds like typical life, but okay.
And that is true. She is a very just like to me, she's just like a regular person. There's not like anything like totally like outstanding. I know that sounds like, well, why would I read about her? But my point is I wanted this book very relatable to people, where you read it and you're like, oh my goodness, that is me, and then maybe give people hope. And I have to say her best friend, Simone or Sai, is a hilarious person. The two of them together are like work very well. They're like opposites, so they get along great.
And they can balance each other out. That's probably one of the beautiful things about life. You started telling us, and then you kind of gave us a little glimpse of what kind of got you started writing. And you mentioned the bucket list, but what got you motivated? Tell us more.
Okay, so you want to know what led me up to it. I actually started writing in high school poems. So I actually started with poetry. I never shared anything or anything like that. And then I started writing with a friend of mine back when there was like Yahoo Groups was a big thing. This is kind of me dating myself a little. When Yahoo Groups was a big thing, we would write, we kind of like created our own world and we all played like characters. So it's kind of like a writing role play thing and all of our characters would interact. So we'd write scenes together. We stopped doing that for a little while. We were going to, one day it was like one of those pipe dreams where you're like, one day I would love to turn this into like a series type thing. She ended up co-writing with someone else about some other stuff, which is great. I'm so proud of her. And then in the meantime, years later, she pulled me into this other group where we were doing like role play writing based off of a author's like series. So it was a little bit kind of like a fanfic type thing. From there, I got to meet a lot of like writers and different people in the area. So I was very happy about that. And then I started back to college. And when I went back to college, as electives, I've always enjoyed writing. So I started taking creative writing classes as electives for my accounting major. And people then they laughed at me. They're like, you have such a left brain person in here in all these creative writing classes. Yeah. So all my electives were filled with creative writing and lit classes. So I took like all these upper level English classes. It was hilarious. And they were all like, you don't belong in accounting. You should be over here with us. And I'm like, no, I don't want an English major. No offense to any English majors out there. I know me. I'm not a good grammar linguistics kind of person. If it was just me reading my novels and understanding certain theories, great. I just know I couldn't have pulled off like an English major. I got a minor in it. that kind of like kept me like with my foot in the door, doing certain classes were poetry, certain classes were short stories. I never wrote anything like longer than that until I decided one day to prove to myself that I could write a novel by myself. I was going through something at the time. It was a really rough year. So it kind of became like a therapy book for me. It was my therapy for the year.
So do you have somebody or an author that has motivated you when you're thinking about writing?
I don't know if I actually have a author that motivated me to want to write. I have certain things and certain aspects of writing that I have tried to learn from. For example, when I was like a junior in high school, we had to read a novel and then give a presentation on it at the end of the semester. But depending on what novel you picked, determined what your maximum grade could be. So if you read something that was a little bit more, like, let's say, not quite that in-depth writing, you might not have gotten such a high grade. I'm not going to use any authors like examples because I don't want to accidentally offend anyone. I wanted an A because I was that kind of a student. So my mother had been reading some books by Jean Auel, the Earth Children series. I jumped into like book number 3 and read The Mammoth Hunters. So I don't know if anyone's ever read any of her books, but she has very rich descriptive writing. And it like sucks you into it and you can see what's taking place in front of you. And that I really enjoy. So every time that I haven't read hers, and I probably should reread it again, but I kind of took that and made it my goal to be very, in-depth descriptive writing. And even when I write my short stories, it was the one thing that when we had to do critiques back in college, people would be like, your descriptions are really great. So I never really had a problem having to try and develop that part. So I took like that from her and dialogue from other people. As you can tell from the section I read, I'm a very rich dialogue person. Like there's a lot of dialogue in my book because to me, that shows a lot between characters about what's going on.
Do you have a favorite book?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know very many readers who could say I have an absolute favorite book. I have different favorite books for different phases of my life. So some of my favorite books that may have been my favorite then may not be my favorite now. And I try to always continue to grow. So I don't really have a favorite book. And I don't even have a favorite genre. Pretty much will read anything romance, like any subgenre of romance. I alternate depending on my mood on what I do. So like I'll read like paranormal for a while and then I'll like switch to say historical and then I'll switch to contemporary. And then in the last several years, I've started getting more into cozy mysteries. And so I really enjoy balancing out some of the romance I read with like these cozy mysteries because they're very lighthearted and some of them like crack me up. If someone would say, hey, I have a really good book for you, I want you to read it, depending on what it was, I'd probably read. Now, I don't read anything like horror related or anything like that because I have really vivid dreams and I grew up having bad nightmares and still do as an adult. So I have to be careful what I watch and what I read, which my mother always laughed at me that I could read about vampires and werewolves and everything. And I was fine, but I couldn't like watch like say 4 episodes of Criminal Minds right before I went to sleep. I'm like, that's too real, I mean, I'll watch that show, but I have to watch only so many episodes and then like I have to do something else before I go to sleep or else I dream about that stuff, which is why I don't watch the news and stuff. I'm a weird one.
No, you're not. I can totally relate in all of that. Sometimes there's too much that you can take in that can affect you in ways that you never even imagined. So yeah, especially if you're a writer, your imagination is always
Yeah,
going.
so this
yes,
book
absolutely.
is not based off of any of my dreams that I've had. The other ones I am currently working on are. So they started with dreams and then I developed them into stories. And I'm going to actually write some of my dreams from like when I was a child all the way up to now and turn them into short stories and do like an anthology. That is like my ultimate goal. Or like another goal of mine is I want to do an anthology of like an A to Z thing where there's a short story for every letter of the alphabet that comes into play into the story somehow. And that idea got started back when I was doing my creative writing classes.
That is an awesome premise for an anthology. I like it. You mentioned you have projects going on. Can you tell us some of those projects?
So I'm currently writing 2 books at the same time, or I'm trying to stay motivated to write 2 books at the same time. I'll talk briefly kind of about the first one. The first one is going to be a series. I have no idea how many books. Each one will be like a standalone, but it's not like a trilogy or something where you follow like one main character, through several of them. It's more like a J.R. Ward, a Sherilyn Kenyon, if you're familiar with that, with like every book they all take place in the same universe and they're all the kind of same thing, but every book is about a different main character. That kind of a series. At least there will probably be 8 to 10. I mean, easily. And I could probably even do like more than that. But I definitely want to do that many. I do have 2 kind of outlined on what I want to do ish. And then another 2 that are kind of like, so the first 4 of them, I know what the first 4 books are going to be about. Wait, no, 5. So I know what the first 5 books are going to be about, or at least character based. And they're kind of like a contemporary romance, but they have elements of fantasy in them. So the series is going to be called Born of Nature. I finally decided on that. And then the first one is called Nature Strike. I tell people it's kind of like a cross between like a romance book and then like either X-Men or like The Last Airbender. So you have like this evil guy that's out to steal people's powers, conquer the world and cause chaos. But the thing about all of these characters is some of them have a symbiotic or a relationship with different forces of nature. Like you have people who are like in control of like lightning and thunder, hurricanes, tornadoes, all of those kind of things. And it's like this relationship. So the more happy or upset that these characters get, it will intensify whatever's going on around them. So at the same time, you have these other people that are trying to kill these, what I call gifted or blessed characters or people. And then once you do, then, they can absorb the power and continue to wreak havoc. That's kind of the premises of that.
That is an incredible, very fulfilling world.
Yeah, and that one was born because I had a dream about a tornado coming to destroy my house. This was a dream, not real. Let me say that again. And so the tornado turned into a man. Okay. Then the man and I had sex. Then he turned back into a tornado and went out the bathroom window and left my house alone. From that, I took into the series got born because I thought about people like turning into different elements of nature and so on and so forth. And I had this dream when I think I was somewhere between 17 and 23.
Very elemental. That is awesome. It is a different perspective on the whole world of what comes with the world and the nature and what they can do.
And this other one is Dream Escape, and it's all about, and it's funny because I had this dream for so many years, and then one day someone saw something that was similar to what I was describing in my book, so I'm like, great. It's all about like this ability to like plug into like a machine at night and tell it or choose, so to speak, what story or what dreams you want to play out while you're sleeping. The character has really bad dreams. Like that part of it is influenced from me having to deal with this. Has really weird, disturbing dreams. And her assistant, who's her best friend, is trying to convince her she needs to go get this machine, try it out to see if it'll help her. Eventually she does. Well, the main guy in the dream actually is the owner of the industry or the company that makes the machine. He was at her work. He wanted to hire the company to do like their Christmas party. He saw her and he made him pick her. So he starts having these interactions with her. And then he starts showing up in her dreams and she just thinks it's random. And I try to take things and turn them a little bit more on their side.
What advice would you give an aspiring author?
What I would tell people is basically what I wrote for my dedication for my book. I want to dedicate this book to all the people wondering if they could ever write a book. Try and push back the doubts and go for it. I believe in you. So my words of wisdom to anyone either wanting to write, whether you want to write for yourself or write to publish, or even if it's outside of the writing industry, no matter what it is, if you don't know if you can do it, just try and get through that, like, that fog of doubt, and just keep trying to do one little thing, and then eventually you'll get there. And if you need someone to say, I believe in you, then I'm going to tell you, I may not know you, but I believe in you, because I tell people if I can do it, then other people can do it. And sometimes all you need is one other person, whether you're not, you know that person or not, to tell you that keep going for it and you can do it, as long as it's legal.
That is very encouraging. I like the fact that you have told them, I believe in you.
Okay, madam, so tell us, where can our readers find your books? Where can they find you? Where are you available?
On ebook, across pretty much whatever you read. So whatever your reader is, it should be available. Whether it's Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Smashwords, if it's a Cope, whatever, Apple, whatever it is that you read, you should be able to find it. Print books you can get off of Amazon. You can find me on Facebook under RK Phillips. I have a reader group called Roxy's Readers. That's what the R in RK stands for.
Oh, madam, it has been such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm wishing you amazing luck with this book and all of your projects, because it's exciting, everything you have going on. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us in another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. Stay tuned for a lot more fun stuff. Thank you.